Put your hands on the hood of the truck, sir. The words hung in the cold morning air just as the first streak of daylight struggled through the rain over Dayton, Ohio. Two police cruisers blocked the entrance to a small repair garage where every dent in the building had a story and every tool had been bought one paycheck at a time. Mason Carter didn't argue. He slowly placed both grease-stained hands on the faded blue hood of his 15-year-old pickup, rain dripping from the sleeves of his worn work jacket. Inside the garage doorway, 9-year-old Chloe stood barefoot on the cracked concrete floor, clutching a faded blue shop towel with her father's name stitched into one corner by hands that were no longer alive. Children rarely understand business or legal accusations, but they always know when someone they love is being treated differently. I have always believed that's one of the hardest things for a child to carry. Regional Director Adrian Cole stood beneath a large black umbrella, his expensive coat untouched by the weather. "Mr. Carter," he said in a calm voice that almost sounded polite, "a prototype control module belonging to Sterling Mobility was discovered in your locker less than 30 minutes ago. Until this investigation is complete, you'll need to cooperate." Mason looked at him without anger. "I already am." Adrian offered the smallest smile. "That's good to hear." A young officer carefully opened Mason's dented toolbox while another photographed every shelf inside the garage. Old socket wrenches, brake pads, half-used bottles of motor oil, a lunch cooler held together with silver duct tape. Nothing looked valuable except the years of honest work covering every surface. Chloe stepped forward before another officer gently stopped her. "My dad didn't steal anything," she said, her voice shaking just enough to remind everyone she was still a little girl. Mason turned his head. "It's okay, sweetheart." She shook her head anyway. "No, it isn't." Across the lot, the quiet hum of a black luxury sedan cut through the steady rain. The driver's door opened. Rebecca Sterling stepped out, dressed in a charcoal coat with rain gathering along the shoulders. No assistants, no cameras, no board members, just silence. Mason recognized her immediately. So did she. For a brief second, neither of them spoke. The woman he had driven through last night's storm looked very different in daylight, but her eyes were exactly the same. Tired, careful, hard to read. Rebecca watched the officers searching his garage. Then she looked at Mason's face. There was confusion there, frustration, but not panic. People who are guilty often rush to explain everything. Mason didn't. He simply stood in the rain because nobody had told him he could do anything else. Adrian walked toward Rebecca. "Miss Sterling, I'm sorry you had to see this." Internal security acted quickly after the missing component was reported. She kept her eyes on Mason. "Reported by whom?" Adrian answered without hesitation. "By me." The rain tapped softly against the hood of Mason's truck. Somewhere inside the garage, water dripped into an old metal bucket with slow, hollow echoes. Chloe tightened her grip around the blue towel until her knuckles turned white. Rebecca noticed the stitching. "Mason Carter. Hand-sewn. Repaired twice." Someone had cared enough to keep that piece of cloth alive long after buying a new one would have been easier. Little things like that tell you more about a family than any resume ever could. One officer approached holding a sealed evidence bag. Inside sat a compact electronic module wrapped in clear plastic. Adrian folded his arms. "This is what we recovered." Mason stared at it for several seconds before quietly saying, "I've never seen that before." Adrian sighed almost sympathetically. "That's not what the security footage suggests." Rebecca lowered her eyes toward the evidence bag, then back to Mason. Neither of them realized that only a few hours earlier, on a lonely stretch of highway during one of the hardest rainstorms of the season, a single decision to stop for a stranded stranger had quietly started unraveling everything. 3 hours earlier, Mason had been driving north on Interstate 75 with the windshield wipers working as hard as they could. Rain covered the road in silver sheets, and every passing truck pushed water across the glass. Chloe sat beside him with a small pizza box on her lap, and her pink raincoat folded beneath her head. "Do you think there will be any pepperoni left when we get home?" she asked. Mason glanced at the box. "Depends how patient you are." "I have been patient for 11 whole minutes." He smiled. "That is almost a record." The truck heater rattled beneath the dashboard. The gas gauge sat just above empty, and $18 rested inside Mason's wallet. 12 was for fuel. The rest had to cover Chloe's allergy medicine in the morning. Then he saw the hazard lights. A dark sedan stood on the shoulder beneath an overpass, its hood raised against the storm. A woman in a soaked gray coat waved one arm as cars passed without slowing. Mason lifted his foot from the gas. Chloe looked through the rain. "Dad, I see her. Are we stopping?" Mason checked the fuel gauge again. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he turned on his signal and eased onto the shoulder. Helping people is easy when it costs nothing. I think the moment tells you who someone is when it takes something they actually need. Mason pulled his old work jacket over his head and stepped into the rain. Water filled his boots before he reached the sedan. "Stay inside," he told the woman. "You will freeze out here." She studied him through the open window, cautious and tired. "My phone is dead. The car just shut off." "Any warning lights?" "Almost all of them." Mason opened the hood and leaned over the engine bay. He did not touch anything at first. He listened. Then he caught the smell. Hot plastic. Faint but wrong. His flashlight moved across the wiring until it stopped near the control relay. One of the mounting bolts carried a stripe of yellow paint. Mason frowned. The part did not belong there. Farther down the shoulder, a black sport utility vehicle sat with its lights off. The instant Mason looked toward it, the engine started. It pulled into traffic and disappeared behind the rain. "Did you see that vehicle?" he asked. The woman turned, but it was already gone. "No." "What?" "Maybe nothing." Mason removed the damaged bolt before it could drop deeper into the engine compartment. He wrapped it in the corner of his blue shop towel and slipped it into his jacket pocket. "Can you fix it?" she asked. "Not safely out here." Thunder rolled somewhere beyond the highway. Mason looked back at his truck, where Chloe was watching through the fogged window. "I can get you to a hotel or a gas station. I do not want to put you out. You are already standing in the rain." She hesitated, then closed the sedan and followed him. Chloe scooted toward the middle seat and handed over her folded raincoat. "You can use this until the heater starts working," she said. The woman smiled for the first time. "Thank you. I am Rebecca." "Chloe, that is my dad, Mason." Mason started the truck. The heater coughed warm air into the cab, and Chloe opened the pizza box. "You can have one," she told Rebecca. "We only have 3 slices," Mason said gently. Chloe looked at him. "Then we each get one." Rebecca accepted the slice with both hands. As Mason pulled back onto the highway, the small red light on his dashboard camera blinked twice. Then it went dark. The truck rolled through the rain with its tired engine humming louder than the radio. Water streamed across the side windows while the headlights carved 2 pale tunnels through the darkness. Rebecca held the warm slice of pizza in both hands without taking another bite. It had been a long time since anyone had offered her something before asking who she was. She watched Mason keep both hands on the steering wheel, his eyes moving between the road and the mirrors with the quiet habit of someone who had driven thousands of late nights. Chloe folded the empty pizza box and tucked it behind her seat. "You can have my last bite," she told Rebecca. "I am full." Mason glanced at his daughter and smiled because he knew she was not. Rebecca broke the small piece in half. "Then we can both pretend we are full." Chloe laughed. "Dad does that all the time." Mason gave a little shake of his head. "I do not know what you are talking about." "Yes, you do. Last Tuesday." Rebecca looked at him. "She remembers everything?" "The important things," Mason answered. The truck reached the next exit where an old gas station shared a parking lot with a small roadside motel. Neon lights flickered through the rain. Mason pulled beside the office entrance and shifted into park. "This place is clean," he said. "The owner lets people check in late." Rebecca reached into her purse. "Please let me pay you for stopping." Mason looked at the folded bills she held out. "Gas money is enough. You drove almost 30 miles out of your way. You still only used gas." She hesitated before handing him a single $20 bill. Mason counted out $8 from his own wallet and gave it back. "That covers what I burned." Rebecca stared at the bills in her hand. "Most people would have taken all of it." Mason shrugged. "I am not most people." She stepped out beneath the motel awning, then turned back. "Thank you. Get inside before you catch a cold." Chloe rolled down her window. "Good night, Rebecca." "Good night, Chloe." The truck eased away from the motel, its taillights fading into the storm. Rebecca stood there watching until they disappeared around the curve. Inside the warm office, she quietly borrowed the manager's phone. "This is Rebecca Sterling," she said. The man behind the counter nearly dropped his coffee mug. Within seconds, her executive assistant answered in a panic. "Miss Sterling, everyone has been searching for you." Where are you? Dayton. We have security on the way. Rebecca looked through the rain toward the highway. No, not yet. Are you safe? She thought about the old pickup, the leaking heater, the little girl who had divided one slice of pizza without hesitation, and the mechanic who had refused extra money even though his boots had holes in them. Yes, she answered softly. I met someone who reminded me what that word actually means. Meanwhile, Mason drove in silence. The fuel needle had dropped lower than he expected. He rubbed his forehead before pulling into a station a few miles from home. $12 filled barely a quarter of the tank. He folded the receipt into his pocket and looked at the clock. The neighborhood pharmacy had closed 6 minutes earlier. Chloe noticed him staring through the windshield. The medicine? She asked quietly. Mason nodded once. First thing tomorrow morning. Chloe reached over and squeezed his arm. I will be okay until then. He smiled because fathers often smile when they wish they had a better answer. As they pulled back onto the road, neither of them noticed another black sport utility vehicle sitting across the street with its lights off, its driver lowering a phone after taking one last picture of Mason's license plate. Rebecca had barely set the motel phone back in its cradle when the glass door opened and Adrian Cole walked in from the rain. He carried a black umbrella in one hand and wore the same calm expression he used in board meetings when everyone else was nervous. Rebecca, he said, like finding her in a roadside motel after midnight was the most ordinary thing in the world. Thank God. She looked at him for a long second. How did you know I was here? Adrian closed the umbrella and shook the water from his sleeve. Your assistant traced the call. I asked her not to send anyone. She was worried. His answer came too quickly. Rebecca noticed that. She noticed other things too. His shoes were almost dry. His coat had only a few dark spots from the rain. He had not driven across town in a hurry. He had been close. What happened to the car? She asked. Adrian gave a tired sigh. Preliminary reports suggest someone interfered with the electrical system. Preliminary reports? Our people checked the vehicle as soon as it was recovered. Rebecca folded her arms. A mechanic stopped to help me. Adrian's face stayed polite. Mason Carter? She did not move. You know his name? He works at Westbridge Motors. We have had concerns about him before. Attendance issues. Problems following procedure. A tendency to challenge management. Rebecca thought about Mason counting out $8 beneath the motel awning. He did not seem careless. Adrian smiled softly. People rarely do at first. The next morning, Mason arrived at Westbridge 23 minutes late, with rain still drying on his jacket. The service bays were already open. Air tools buzzed. A radio played old country music near the parts counter. Adrian waited beside Mason's workbench with a folder tucked under one arm. Rough night? He asked. Mason set down his lunch cooler. Had to stop for someone. So I heard. Adrian opened the folder and placed a report on the bench. Sign this. Mason read the first page. It stated that he had accessed a Sterling mobility test vehicle without authorization and may have caused damage to its control system. He read it again, slower this time. I did not cause the damage. The report does not say you did. It says your actions may have contributed. That means the same thing after legal reads it. Adrian's smile faded by half an inch. This is standard procedure. Mason turned the paper around and tapped the time printed near the bottom. This report was entered at 10:41 last night. And the car did not break down until 11:08. The noise in the service bay seemed to pull farther away. Adrian looked down at the page, then back at Mason. You are mistaken. No. Mason pushed the folder across the bench. Someone wrote the story before it happened. Adrian closed the folder carefully. Refusing to cooperate will not help you. Signing a lie will not help me either. Across town, Rebecca sat alone in a small conference room at Sterling Mobility headquarters with the same report glowing on her laptop. She checked the timestamp once. Then again. 10:41 in the evening. She looked at the roadside assistance log. 11:08. For the first time that morning, she stopped thinking about Mason as a kind stranger and started thinking about him as a problem someone wanted removed. Her phone rang. Adrian's name appeared on the screen. Before she answered, a security alert opened on her computer. A prototype control module had just been found inside Mason Carter's locker. By the time Rebecca reached Westbridge Motors, 2 police cruisers were already parked across the front entrance. Mason stood beside his truck with rain running down the back of his jacket, exactly where the officers had told him to stay. Chloe was in the garage doorway, still holding the blue shop towel. Adrian stepped forward as Rebecca approached. Security found the missing module in Mr. Carter's locker, he said. We also pulled footage showing him entering the parts room after hours. Rebecca looked at Mason. Did you go into the parts room last night? Yes. His answer came without hesitation. Adrian lifted one eyebrow. You see the problem. Mason kept his eyes on Rebecca. I returned a diagnostic scanner I borrowed during my shift. There is no record of that, Adrian said. There would be if you had not removed it. Rebecca turned toward him. Let him answer. Adrian nodded and stepped back, but the satisfaction in his face did not leave. An officer held up the sealed evidence bag. Inside was a control module with a silver Sterling Mobility label. This was found behind a stack of rags in the upper section of his locker, the officer explained. Mason stared at it. That is not mine. It belongs to the company, Adrian said, which makes the location more concerning. Rebecca studied Mason's face. She wanted to see certainty there. Instead, she saw a tired man trying to understand how his own workplace had turned unfamiliar overnight. What did you remove from my car? She asked. Mason reached into his jacket pocket slowly and pulled out the blue towel. Chloe stepped forward. Dad, I have the other one. Mason looked back at her, then unfolded the cloth in his hand. A small bolt with a stripe of yellow paint rested in the center. This, he said. It was loose near the relay. I took it out so it would not fall into the engine compartment. Adrian let out a quiet breath. So you admit removing a part. A bolt is not a control module. It is still unauthorized interference. Rebecca looked at the yellow paint, then at the sealed bag. The facts did not fit together, but they were close enough to make doubt feel reasonable. That is how most false stories work. They do not need to be perfect. They only need to arrive before the truth does. What about the security footage? She asked. Mason's jaw tightened. Show me the full recording. Adrian opened a tablet and played a short clip. Mason entered the parts room at 9:47 in the evening. He carried a scanner in one hand. 40 seconds later, the clip ended. Where is the rest? Mason asked. The system stopped recording, Adrian said. Convenient, Mason replied. That attitude is not helping you. Rebecca watched the clip again. The image was clear. Mason was there. The missing module was in his locker. His fingerprints were on the outer packaging because, according to Adrian, Mason had serviced the same unit 2 weeks earlier. Every piece pointed in one direction. Not strongly, not cleanly, but together. Rebecca folded her arms. Until we know more, you are suspended with pay. Mason looked at her. You believe him? I believe the evidence needs to be examined. That is not what I asked. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Rain clicked against the metal roof. Chloe stood so still that the towel in her hands barely moved. Rebecca lowered her voice. I cannot ignore what was found. Mason nodded once, slowly. And I cannot make you trust me. Adrian handed him a suspension letter. Mason read the first line, folded the paper, and put it inside his jacket. He did not argue. He did not ask for special treatment. He simply walked toward Chloe. Come on, sweetheart. But the garage, she whispered. We will figure it out. Before they reached the truck, a white envelope caught under the garage door and slid across the wet floor. Mason picked it up. The property owner had terminated his lease, effective in 7 days, because of the investigation. Chloe read the first few words over his arm. Are we losing this place too? Mason looked at the garage where he had spent 4 years building something small and honest. Then he looked at Rebecca. Looks like it. Mason drove home with both hands tied on the steering wheel, but not because of the rain. The road was familiar. The silence was not. Chloe sat beside him with the folded lease notice resting on her knees. She read the first sentence 3 times before quietly sliding it back into the envelope. Dad, she asked. Yes. Are we really leaving the garage? Mason kept his eyes on the road. Not today, but maybe next week? He took a slow breath. Maybe. Chloe looked out the window. I like that place. Me too. The truck turned onto their narrow street just as the rain eased into a light mist. Their small rental house looked exactly the same as it had the night before, but somehow everything felt different. Mason unlocked the front door, switched on the porch light, and set his work boots beside the mat. He placed the blue shop towel on the kitchen table without unfolding it. The yellow-striped bolt was still wrapped inside. He stared at it for a long moment before putting it back exactly where it had been. Can I have cereal? Chloe asked. Of course. She poured the last of the cereal into 2 bowls and quietly pushed the fuller one toward her father. Mason smiled. Nice try. He switched them back. Growing kids eat first. She wanted to argue, but she knew she would lose. Across town, Rebecca sat alone in her office long after everyone else had gone home. The suspension report remained open on her screen. So did the vehicle recovery log. She read every line again. The timeline still bothered her. Reports were never supposed to exist before incidents happened. She pressed the intercom. Karen, are you still here? Yes, Miss Sterling. Send me every security file from Westbridge Motors between 9 o'clock and midnight yesterday. Everything. Not just the clips attached to the investigation. Right away. 20 minutes later, dozens of files appeared on her computer. Rebecca played them one by one. Most showed empty hallways, parked vehicles, or employees finishing their shifts. Then she noticed something strange. Camera 12 showed Mason entering the parts room at 9:47. Camera 13, covering the opposite hallway, suddenly skipped forward almost 3 minutes. That is impossible, she whispered. The system automatically synchronized every camera in the building, unless someone manually edited the files. Meanwhile, Chloe sat on the living room floor with her small notebook open across her lap. She had filled its pages with drawings of license plates ever since her mother taught her that every car had its own name written in numbers. She slowly turned back to the page she had sketched during the storm. Dad. Mason looked up from the bills spread across the kitchen table. What is it? I remember the black sport utility vehicle. The one near the highway? She nodded. I could not read all the numbers because of the rain. That is okay. But I drew the sticker. Mason walked over. On the corner of the page was a careful drawing of an orange football helmet beside the letters Bengals. It had this on the back window, Chloe said, and one broken tail light. Mason studied the sketch without saying anything. A few miles away, Rebecca searched the company fleet database for every vendor vehicle matching a black sport utility vehicle with a Cincinnati Bengals window decal. One result appeared almost immediately. The registered owner was not Sterling Mobility. It belonged to Cole Industrial Supply, a company managed by Adrian Cole's younger brother. Rebecca leaned back in her chair. The room suddenly felt much quieter. She picked up her phone, but before she could dial, a new notification flashed across her screen. Evidence from Mason Carter's dashboard camera had been logged into police storage. Status: memory card missing. Rebecca did not wait until morning. She drove to the Dayton Police Evidence Office before sunrise, hoping the missing memory card had simply been logged separately. A gray-haired evidence clerk searched the inventory twice before looking up with an apologetic expression. The camera was checked in, he said. The memory card was not. Rebecca frowned. Was the camera damaged? No, ma'am. It was empty when it arrived. She thanked him and walked back into the cool morning air with more questions than answers. Across town, Mason sat at his kitchen table staring at the unpaid bills spread beside his coffee mug. The coffee had gone cold an hour earlier. Chloe walked in carrying her backpack and quietly placed the blue shop towel beside him. Dad. Yes. Can I see the bolt again? Mason unfolded the towel and placed the small yellow-striped bolt in her hand. Chloe studied it, then looked at the stitching along the edge of the cloth. Remember when the camera stopped blinking? She asked. Mason looked up. On the highway? She nodded quickly. You said the card might have come loose because the truck hit that pothole. Mason leaned back in his chair. For several seconds he did not speak. Then his eyes widened just enough for Chloe to notice. I never put it back. What? The memory card. He stood so quickly the chair scraped across the floor. When the light went out, I pulled over for a minute. Chloe smiled. You wrapped it in something so it would not get wet. Mason froze. His eyes slowly dropped to the faded blue towel lying across the table. Not this one, Chloe whispered. The other one. She ran down the hallway and disappeared into her bedroom. A moment later she returned carrying another blue shop towel, older than the first, the edges worn soft from years of use. Mom used this one, Chloe said. You told me to keep it because it still smelled like the garage. Mason carefully unfolded the cloth. A tiny black memory card slipped onto the table and landed beside the yellow-striped bolt with a soft click. Neither of them spoke. Sometimes the smallest sounds carry the biggest weight. Mason picked up the card like it might break in his fingers. I forgot, he whispered. I wrapped it so it would stay dry after the rain. Chloe smiled. I knew you would remember eventually. At Sterling Mobility headquarters, Rebecca was reviewing vendor invoices when her phone rang. Ms. Sterling, Mason said quietly. I think I found something. Less than an hour later, Rebecca arrived at the small rental house, carrying only a laptop. She stepped inside and looked around. The furniture was old but clean. Family photographs filled one wall. Sarah smiled from every frame, and Chloe had drawn little paper hearts around several of them with colored pencil. Rebecca noticed the care before she noticed the lack of money. Mason placed the memory card on the kitchen table. I thought it was gone. Rebecca slid it into the laptop. The first video appeared on the screen. Rain poured across the windshield exactly as they remembered. The stalled sedan came into view. Then, several seconds before Mason pulled onto the shoulder, another vehicle appeared clearly in the recording. The same black sport utility vehicle Chloe had sketched in her notebook. It stopped beside Rebecca's sedan for almost 2 minutes before driving away, just as Mason arrived. Rebecca paused the video. Zoom in, Chloe said. Rebecca enlarged the image until the rear window filled the screen. The broken tail light was visible. So was the Cincinnati Bengals decal. But something else appeared beneath the company logo on the driver's door. A small fleet number. Rebecca typed it into the company database. The registration opened immediately. Vehicle 27. Assigned directly to Cole Industrial Supply. She slowly closed the laptop and looked at Mason. This was never about you, she said. Before Mason could answer, Rebecca's phone vibrated. The caller identification displayed Adrian Cole. She let it ring once, then twice, before answering. His first words made her blood run cold. Rebecca, he said calmly. I think you should stop looking before this becomes much worse for everyone. The emergency board meeting began at 9 o'clock sharp. Every seat around the long walnut table was filled. Department heads, legal advisors, regional managers, and outside auditors all watched quietly as Rebecca Sterling walked to the front of the room, carrying only a laptop and a small blue shop towel folded neatly beneath one arm. Adrian Cole sat halfway down the table with the same confident smile he had worn all week. Rebecca, he said pleasantly, I hope we can resolve this misunderstanding before it affects the company any further. She looked at him for a moment before answering. So do I. Mason waited outside the conference room with Chloe. He had almost refused to come. I do not belong in there, he had told Rebecca earlier that morning. You belong wherever the truth belongs, she had replied. Even now he looked uncomfortable wearing the only dress shirt he owned. Chloe reached over and straightened his collar. Mom used to do that, she said softly. Mason smiled without saying anything. Inside the boardroom, Adrian stood first. He spoke calmly, carefully, and with the confidence of someone who believed the ending had already been written. He described missing equipment, broken procedure, damaged trust, and the responsibility every company had to protect its reputation. When he finished, several board members nodded. Then Rebecca stood. Thank you, she said. Now I would like everyone to see the part of the story that was left out. She connected the laptop to the large screen. Rain filled the room through the speakers before anyone saw the highway. The dashboard recording began exactly where Mason's truck first approached the stalled sedan. Every minute played without interruption. They watched Mason stop. They watched him refuse extra money. They watched him take only enough cash to replace the gasoline he had used. Then Rebecca paused the video. Please look at the upper left corner. The black sport utility vehicle appeared clearly beside her disabled sedan nearly 2 minutes before Mason arrived. Rebecca enlarged the image until the fleet number became visible. Vehicle 27, she said. Owned by Cole Industrial Supply. Adrian leaned forward. That proves nothing. Rebecca nodded. Not by itself. She pressed another key. Financial records appeared beside maintenance logs. Vendor invoices matched replacement parts that had never actually been installed. Warranty claims showed expensive new components, while service photographs revealed old recycled parts still inside customer vehicles. Every one of these invoices was approved through Mr. Cole's regional office, Rebecca said. Adrian's expression hardened for the first time. Coincidences happen. They do, Rebecca answered. Patterns do not. She opened one final file. The timestamp from the original incident report filled the screen. 10:41 in the evening. Beside it appeared the roadside assistance log, showing her emergency call at 11:08. The room became very quiet. This report existed 27 minutes before my vehicle failed, Rebecca said. Someone prepared the accusation before the breakdown happened. One board member slowly removed his glasses. Another leaned closer to the screen without speaking. Rebecca turned toward the conference room doors. Please come in. Mason entered first, Chloe beside him holding the folded blue towel. He looked at the faces around the table, but kept his hands in his pockets. Rebecca placed the yellow-striped bolt beside the larger control module recovered from Mason's locker. Mr. Carter, she said, would you explain the difference? Mason picked up the small bolt. This belongs near the relay housing, he said simply. I removed it because it had worked loose. If it fell deeper into the engine, somebody could have ended up stranded or worse. This control module is different. It was never in my hands that night. He set both pieces back on the table. I fix cars so families get home safely. That is my whole job. No speeches. No anger. Just the truth. Sometimes the simplest words weigh the most. Rebecca looked around the room before speaking one final time. Mr. Carter did not fail this company. This company failed him. At the far end of the table, the chairman quietly turned toward the corporate security director. Suspend Mr. Cole's building access immediately, he said. Adrian pushed back his chair, but before he could answer, 2 security officers stepped through the doorway. 3 months later, the rain came back to Dayton, but this time nobody was standing alone beside the road. The service bays at Westbridge Motors sounded different now. New safety procedures hung on every wall. Every technician had the right to report problems without fearing for a paycheck. Sterling Mobility had canceled every contract connected to Adrian Cole's operation, replaced thousands of questionable parts, and created an independent inspection team led by people who had actually spent years turning wrenches instead of sitting behind conference tables. Mason never asked for the position. Rebecca offered it anyway. You know what honest work looks like, she told him. I need someone who will tell me the truth, even when I do not want to hear it. Mason thought about it for nearly a week before accepting. One condition, he finally said. Rebecca smiled. I had a feeling there would be one. If another mechanic refuses to sign a false report, nobody gets punished for doing the right thing. Rebecca held out her hand. Done. The old garage stayed open too. When the property owner learned Mason had been cleared and the investigation exposed the real fraud, he quietly tore up the eviction notice. Looks like I backed the wrong story, he admitted. Mason simply nodded. Thank you for giving us another chance. Some people expect revenge after a hard season. Mason never did. He seemed more interested in fixing what was broken than keeping score. Every Saturday morning, he opened the garage for free classes where single parents learned basic car maintenance so they could save money and keep their families safe. Chloe loved those mornings. She walked around carrying a clipboard that was much too big for her and reminded everyone to tighten their lug nuts twice. Dad says checking twice is cheaper than buying new tires, she would tell them with complete confidence. The adults always laughed. Rebecca came often, usually without announcing herself. She parked outside in an ordinary sedan instead of a company car and left her phone in the glove compartment. One rainy afternoon, she stepped into the garage carrying a paper bag from a neighborhood bakery. I brought cinnamon rolls, she said. Chloe grinned. You remembered. Some things are worth remembering. Mason wiped his hands on the same faded blue shop towel before taking the bag. Rebecca noticed the careful stitching along the edge again. You still use it every day? Mason looked down at the cloth and smiled. Sarah fixed everything she could with her hands. Throwing it away never felt right. Rebecca nodded quietly. I think she would like knowing it is still helping people. They stood there for a moment listening to the rain tapping softly against the metal roof. Nobody hurried to fill the silence. Chloe finally walked between them, holding 2 mugs of hot chocolate. The weather says it is going to rain all afternoon, she said. Rebecca accepted one of the mugs. Then I guess I picked the right place to be. Months earlier, one ride through a storm had brought strangers together. Now nobody felt like a stranger anymore. Families are not always built the way we expect. Sometimes they begin with a small act of kindness that almost nobody notices. Looking back, the most valuable thing Mason gave that night was never the gasoline, the time, or even the ride. It was the simple decision to stop when everyone else kept driving. We meet people every day who may be carrying burdens we cannot see, and we rarely know how much a small kindness can change another life or quietly protect our own. I think that is something worth remembering the next time the road is long, the weather is bad, and someone is standing alone hoping at least one person will choose not to pass them by.